of the Interstate 35 Community School District to order. We welcome the newly elected board members, Melissa Keller from District 4 and Monica Strange from District 3. And at this time, we will swear you in and issue the oath of office to you. I'll talk loud. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties as a Director of the Board of Education in the Interstate 35 Community School District, as now and hereafter required by law? At this time, I will open the floor for nominations for the office of President of the I-35 Board of Directors, and I would ask that each nomination be made in the form of a motion.
I'll move to nominate Jeremy Mask for President of the school board.
I'd second that.
Is there a second nomination? Hearing none, let's take a vote. Answer A or nay when I read your name. Jeremy?
Yay.
Roger?
Yay.
Melissa?
Yay.
Monica?
Yay.
Eddie?
Yay.
So, congratulations, Jeremy. You're the board president. Passes 5-0. And at this time, I will hand it over to you after I swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of President of the Board of Directors in the Interstate 35 Community School District, as now and hereafter required by law?
I will.
Congratulations. As I said, now I'll turn it over to you for the election of the Vice President.
I will now open the floor for nominations for the office of Vice President of the I-35 Board of Directors. I would ask that nominations be made in the form of a motion.
I motion that Roger Canoy for Vice President.
I'll second that motion.
Is there a second motion for
Or
Vice President?
second nomination.
Or nomination, motion? Nomination in the form of a motion?
Nothing here.
Since we have only one nomination, I'll read off your name. Please answer A or nay. Jeremy?
Yay.
Roger?
Yay.
Melissa?
Yay.
Monica?
Yay.
Eddie?
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Congratulations, Roger. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of Vice President of the Board of Directors in the Interstate 35 Community School District, as now and hereafter required by law?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations.
That moves us to the public hearing on the 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024 school calendars. I believe there are introductory remarks to be made.
So I just wanted to go through the process for those that don't know how we generate the calendar. We do have a committee that is teachers, staff. It's open to any employees. And we were asked to consider getting the calendar out before Christmas if possible, just so people can make plans for vacations and whatnot. So we've done this. 2 years ago, we approved both calendars. I think it's important to remember that the calendar can only be changed if there is a public hearing. So once this calendar goes into effect, it can only be changed if there's a public hearing that talks about why we want to make the change, which we had to do last year with some of the days that we were using for different purposes. So the calendar committee met and presented, the overwhelming response from the committee was to keep the calendar similar to what it has been the last 2 years. And then we sent the two calendar options, or the calendars out to the staff. We had a couple of people that had questions about really two issues. One was the Friday after conferences right now is a PD day, and they asked if that could be a day off, and then make the PD day be, right now we take that day off the day before Thanksgiving and the day after Easter. And so they had asked to get feedback on that. And then the other question they had asked about was our Friday PD. We do PLCs during the week, and so they are compensated that time on Fridays. And they had asked about the possibility of either an early out or a late start every week, so that would take care of that PLC time. So we sent that to all of the teachers. That one obviously directly impacts families. So we sent a survey out just asking that very question to families, and you can see the results there as a result. So the calendar committee is recommending the two calendar options that were presented to the staff, and I'm going to see if I can't pull those up real quick. So for the 2022-2023 school year, we start on or after August 23rd. So you'll see our start date changes by day of the week. We have Friday PDs built in there. We are required to have 1,080 hours. This calendar is built at 1,162 hours. That allows if we need to dismiss for bad weather, so we're not rushing to make up days at the end of the year. And so this is the draft of that calendar. It is very similar to what we had this year. The Christmas break is a little shorter. I think people pointed that out, but it's the way that the holiday fell this year and next year. So it does allow us to be out of school by the 24th of May. So take your good and your bad with that when you have an earlier date for Christmas. And then the 23-24 calendar is very similar. And obviously we moved it back a date because of the restriction to start on or after the 23rd of August. And then the same setup. We did add a day on both to take the 2nd of January off. In the sample that was not, so they opted to take that day off and actually go until the 23rd. So minor changes from what we've seen, but those are the two recommended calendars. So
We will open it up for the public question and answer at this point. If anybody has a comment or a question, please come forward. Not having anybody come forward, we will go ahead and close the public question and answer at this point, and we will close the public hearing. All right, that moves us to the next item, discuss and/or approve committee representation. This does require a motion and a second for us to take action on it.
So this is where you get to volunteer.
Do we do those individually, vote on them, or
No,
do we
we'll do it
vote on all of
collectively,
them?
unless
And then-
there's
okay.
an objection. I would say just do them all.
Okay.
Or multiple people for the same spot.
Yeah, no more than two.
All right.
And so,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Warren County's the first one on there. I know I'm in Warren County.
Warren County
I'm happy
Conference
to-
Board. And I guess it would probably be helpful if we explain what the conference boards are.
Okay, the conference board is actually, oversees the assessor for each county.
Yep.
And is made up of school districts, the mayors, and the board
Of supervisors.
of supervisors, correct? So,
Having sat on the Madison County Conference Board for multiple years, sometimes they have a problem getting the quorums met. You know, they're usually pretty quick, but you set like the budgets, salaries, things like that for the assessors. So for the Warren County Conference Board, we'd need a resident of Warren County who is willing to attend those meetings.
I don't know what county you guys are in, but I'm happy to be that representative if nobody else is.
All right?
I think, Monica, you're the only other one that's willing.
And I defer to you if you, okay. I mean, I'm happy to. Or we can do up to 2 as well if you're interested.
Madison County?
That's me and you.
Yeah,
What do you want?
I'm okay if you want it.
I'll take Madison County.
It's a good group, Roger.
I don't think I was there last year.
Clark County?
I'll take Clark. I've already committed.
And you're the only clerk on state.
By default.
See, this is going well.
Yeah.
All right, so the next committee is the Negotiations Committee. This is the board representation with our chief negotiator in negotiations with the certified staff and the support staff. Did we have 2 people last time? So, and that's, we have to have 2 instead of 3 because of the quorum rules that we have to follow, so. I will continue to serve on that if nobody else is interested.
I would volunteer for the negotiations committee as well.
No? Huh? You would? I would be happy to step aside and allow that to happen. No, it's a good thing, yeah. Any other volunteers? Okay. Roger and Monica. School Improvement Advisory Committee.
I would volunteer for this.
As would I. Okay. Facilities Committee.
I'd like to be in the facilities committee again. I stepped away last year. I'd like to rejoin, I think, if possible.
I'm happy to provide a second. Again, if others are interested, I'd be happy to defer to.
Okay. We do need to have a motion and a second to accept the committee assignments. You're not technically at the meeting until you're in the minutes.
Right, gotta give the minutes.
Give me a chance.
Or,
I motion to approve all of the committees.
That's fine with me.
And I'll second that motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the committee assignments. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That moves us to the superintendent's recommendations on annual designations. This does require a motion and a second to approve, and we will go ahead and take them all as a whole again unless we have a different motion. So, board secretary and treasurer, the recommendation is Ted Bauer. School Depository recommended Union State Bank and ISJIT, which is the Iowa School Joint Investment Trust. Union State Bank in Truro has a maximum depository amount of $10 million, and the ISJIT has a maximum depository amount of $10 million. Legal counsel recommended is Ehlers and Cooney. School of Insurance recommendation is EMC. Official district publication recommendation is the Madisonian. Regular board meeting date and time recommended is the fourth Monday of each month at 6 p.m. The level 1 and level 2 investigators. The level 1 investigator recommendation is Thad Tusi and Angela Steinlage. The level 2 investigator recommended is the Madison County Sheriff. ADA 504 coordinator recommendation is Natasha Cooper. Affirmative action recommendation is Jennifer Boffman. Equity coordinator recommendation is Steve Castor. Truancy officer recommendation is Rose Dickinson. Free and reduced lunch steering officer recommended is Deanne Strange. And the chief negotiator recommendation is the superintendent.
I guess we'll probably open the discussion just with the questions on the legal counsel. Can you explain to us, one, how it's selected, and then secondly, is it a yearly retainer? Is it a monthly thing? What does that all look like?
Yeah, so really it comes down to availability. I would say there are probably three probably well-known law firms in the state of Iowa that provide legal counsel to schools. So Ehlers and Cooney has, 8 attorneys probably that provide services to the school, but there are other options. I think as far as fees, retainers, we just retain as we use services. So if we don't have questions, if we don't have anything that we run past them, we don't pay anything. That's correct. I mean, I just want to make sure because that's how I interpreted it. So I think the conversation or the question is what we can look for other counsel. I think that two things go into that level of trust, and I feel like that our current counsel, who we use specifically is Danielle Hainfield, has done a remarkable job of answering our very specific questions, answering questions when we try and think outside the box, and she tells us what we're going to be up against regardless of what we do, and I share that information with you. So I think that that's a component or that's a factor. She's not the only attorney I've worked with. I've worked with other attorneys, so it doesn't have to be that option, but I will say I've never known her to give us feedback that's partisan. It's always based on what the law allows or doesn't allow. So if that's the concern, I'm leery of moving if we have trust with somebody, which is why I would keep that recommendation when the feedback I get is not partisan. So, but if the board would like me to look into more options, I sure can, but that would be still my recommendation.
How long has she been counsel for the school?
Prior to her, it was Drew Bracken, and then we had a different superintendent, and he wanted to switch to the current one.
So I think it's probably been 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And they're both in the same firm?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Allers.
Yes.
Okay.
What percentage of school districts does the 3 represent? Like, how fragmented is it of a market, do you know?
Oh, almost all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of options for schools, unless you go with typically you don't go with an independent practice for that. You go with somebody that specializes in school law.
Right. Okay. And when you say she doesn't give you partisan advice, can you help me unpack that? Like what?
Right, so I asked a question about the OSHA mandate, And I just said, what are we obligated to do? What are we not obligated to do? What leeway do we have as far as a board? And so the conversation comes back with, well, here's what the statute says. Here's what you're allowed to do as we know it right now. Now, she also will do a good job of following up if that changes. So we had the guidance, and I'll talk about this when we get to that OSHA mandate. The very first guidance we got about 2 weeks ago was you should plan to implement by December 4th or 5th. And I think what they do is they look at, given all of the conditions of that law, what impact does it have on the school? So for example, if we don't have a policy in place, that would be willful negligence on the part of the board, which I think some boards are choosing to do. My understanding is that's a $136,000 fine. So she would say, if you choose not to pass the policy that requires this, you're subjecting the school and your taxpayers to a $136,000 fine. That to me isn't partisan, that's just what it is. So would I recommend that if we have to put that OSHA mandate in place that we do it? Well, I feel like if I'm a steward of taxpayer dollars, that makes sense. So she's going to talk about the legalities of what we can do within that law, or give us feedback on that, but every attorney I've worked with has done that. So I've not ever had, well, this is why I would recommend this, and ever felt like it was either conservative or liberal, and the viewpoint is just, here's what the law is, here are the parameters of what we know, if that changes, we'll tell you.
Gotcha. And then maybe for the benefit of the new board members, what are the common cases where you go to your attorneys and say, help me, because I know I've talked to not talked to her, but had interactions with Danielle over the years, and yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, great question. Obviously, we did a lot more with them in the last year, 18 months, than we ever have, just because of all the guidelines, mandates, what are we subject to, what are we legally responsible for if we don't follow public health guidelines, what are we, I mean, those are the kinds of questions we asked. They also help us with things like personnel issues. If we have something where there's a question of whether or not somebody should be terminated or what process we use, suspensions, she comes, and I think she's been to the board a couple of times to talk about suspension process or expelling a student. So that would be, it's really the whole gamut of what we might have a question around is in terms of Iowa code and school practice. What we do day in and day out, and how do we make the code work for that. We did have a civil or a litigation against the school a couple of years ago that she walked us through that process when there was a question about eligibility for activities. So those are the kinds of things. It's really the wide gamut of any kind of question where we have to interpret Iowa code and apply it to actual practice in school. That's what we ask questions on typically.
Any other questions or comments on the recommendations for annual designations? I would entertain a motion, and it would require a second before we could vote.
I would move to approve the superintendent's recommendations on the annual designations as presented.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the superintendent's recommendations on annual designations as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? That moves us to new business. This is for discussion only. It's discussion on early retirement.
So this is, again, timeline-wise, we try and get really good candidates for any positions that we have open in early spring. And so we have moved up our timeline on this about 3 years ago, where the district, when they do offer early retirement as an option, we try and get the information to our staff by the end of December so that they can meet with their tax consultants, their accountants, that kind of thing, their IPERS representatives to see if it's a good fit for now or not. And so we want to give them as much time, but we would like to get the early retirement applications back so they can be brought to the January board meeting so that we can start advertising for those positions if the board chooses to do that. We did have some questions about the number of people eligible. If you remember, last year we used the criteria of 55 years old and 15 years in the district. We did have questions about extending that to 60 years old or 20 years in the district. To be truthful, my recommendation would be not to offer early retirement this year. I think there are too many unknowns with staffing as far as we're seeing shortages in almost every arena. We have schools in our conference that are about as far from Des Moines as we are that have positions that are open currently, and these are elementary teaching positions that are open. They have not had a teacher in them all year. I have some real concerns about that. So my recommendation would be not to offer early retirement. We have done it in the past. So, obviously this is something that you decide, and I understand the reasons to offer it, but I think we have so many uncertainties right now that if you were asking for what I would recommend, it would be not to offer it. So I just wanted to make sure the discussion was being had.
So, I guess, and we've talked about some of this at the past meetings, but I want to reiterate some of these questions. When did we make our last full-time hire for a teacher here?
Last board meeting,
Okay. And was that a hard-to-fill position?
yes.
If we did offer early retirement, how many teachers do you think would want to take it?
So if we use, it depends on the threshold. So when we look at, if it's 15 years of experience and 55, I think 7 teachers are eligible. I honestly don't know how many would take it. We usually get conversations about that in December once the board takes action. I think some would, some I don't know. But we have to plan for up to 7 if we leave those parameters. If we changed it to even, I think, 60 and 20 years of experience, we have 1 person that would be eligible for it. So I know that there's always conversation about, honoring people who have committed to the district and honoring people who have put in time, and I completely respect that. And so, like I said, I can see the benefit of it, but I also, it would not be a cost-saving measure, which is what it's really built to do for districts, but it would be a way to recognize and honor people who are in the district and have served the district for several years.
I mean, from my standpoint, it's a cost-saving mechanism, but it's also, I do think we should not undervalue, the longevity piece and keeping good teachers in our schools for long periods of time. So I do think we should take that into account when making this decision. I do not want to undersell the tough-to-fill teaching positions, though, as well. That is extremely important. So I just talked in a circle. I completely understand that, but the longevity piece is something we can't overlook, in my opinion, as a board.
And I guess I would say we're here to run the school first, and if the school can't fill teacher positions or is having a difficult time doing it, that's job 1. And then longevity is very important to the school. Our teachers are wonderful, wonderful people, especially some of those people that have been here for so long and dedicated their lives to this community. As long as we keep the management fund up, though, we still have the opportunity, once this teacher shortage is filled, to possibly extend it in future years. So am I wrong in saying the opportunity is still available? If we choose, we can go on and off and toggle year after year?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And the other thing that you have the option for is, this would be an example when I would contact the lawyer. You can deny, so you can send the early retirement out there, but you can deny any application that comes in. So if you've got a hard to fill, you can tell somebody no. Now, I wouldn't do that, but it is an option, and I want to make sure you're aware of all your options, but I don't know if there's a timeline. So if you offer early retirement, it has to be offered before April 15th. And so we have time, but if we want to get good candidates in, we need to be in that February, March window for hiring. So that's why that's why I want the conversation between you now, so that if you want me to bring information to the December meeting as you decide that, when I'll put it on for action, I can get it ready. And so,
So am I understanding right? We would be able to offer it, they would be able to accept, but if we couldn't fill the position, then we could recant? I mean,
within so many days, yeah, you can deny an
Got it.
applicant that comes in.
got it. So they're, just like selling your house, it would be a contingency upon filling the
Correct.
role.
Again, I'm not recommending that.
Yep, that's a
I'm
that's a
just telling
slippery
you that
slope.
that could be an option.
Okay.
Just to be clear on the timeline, though, you know, you threw out that April date and stuff, but what's in the agenda here for voting on this next board meeting is important timeline with respect to the employees, correct?
Correct, for hiring, for
For hi-
potential new employees.
For hiring
Yes,
and the
for the
existing
existing employees as they plan for, yes.
So don't kick the bucket down the road, make a decision.
Well, or ask me to get more information. If we have to push it to January, I don't mind, but I just want to make sure we're pushing it for the right reason.
So Sharon, what is the proper way if one of the board members takes this home, thinks about it, and decides they want a couple different configurations put together? What's the proper venue for doing that?
I would
An email to you?
email Mr. Bauer. He
Mr.
will get
Bauer.
you whatever
Okay.
numbers or figures you would like to see as scenarios. And then if there's something in the configuration of the language that you want us to consider, then let me know. And if it's something I don't know, like I said, I'll run that past the attorney and we'll figure out if we can do it or not.
Are there any other questions or conversation on early retirement?
Do you think not offering it would kind of make maybe somebody that's thinking about it upset? And maybe, you know, that would affect their teaching come next year?
Yeah, I think this is where the board has to make that choice each year, because I do think sometimes it becomes an expectation. People think, oh, I'm not going to do it this year because I know it's next year. There are some boards, I don't think it would impact teaching, because I think our teachers are professional and they would be here and they'd be here for kids. So I don't think that, but I do think that there are some boards that, you know, I think, for example, close to us, Winterset offers $5,000 as an early retirement incentive, and they don't even offer it all the time. Some boards offer full insurance until the person is 65. So depending on what you want to do to recognize, I think is really what you honor their contribution to the district, you can set that at whatever you want it to be. We've done for the last 2 or 3 years, an HRA account where, because it's for tax purposes, if we're going to give them $30,000 in an HRA account, which can help offset the cost for their insurance, then that they get all $30,000 of it. If we were to do a buyout option, then they have to pay taxes on, and so there are some legalities with all of that. So the option that we're on right now, or that we've used in the past, you can consider anything. We can increase the number as long as we have money in the management. So you can offer one person $100,000, you can offer the next person $5,000, you can do whatever you want as a board as you look at this topic. But we've done $30,000, and the payout is in July 25th, the year that they retire. So then they have that money, and they can use it for their retirement, their health retirement account. So that's where we've been, because it I think honors people, helps them if they are thinking about retiring to get to the maybe bridge to when they get insurance through the government. But I do think we would have some people that if they had been planning on this, yes, it would be a setback. I do think that's true. But I think you also have to think about, and we've talked about this as a board, do you want it to be something that's continually offered? And if you do, then that just becomes what it is, and this becomes a formality. But if it's something where you want to talk about, is it saving us money? Is it going to be a detriment if we offer it and if we lose 7 teachers? I'm very concerned about hiring 7 teachers for next school year, considering the number of teachers that we have leave the district to move to a district closer to where they live. So that's a big concern of mine. We had 2 teachers retire, 3 teachers retire last year, 4. And we had 12 new teachers total. So even if we have 7 retire and we have to fill that same number, now we're up to 18, 19 teachers, that is a little alarming to me. And so it has to be what the board, how you want to approach it. If you want it to be something that honors, then I do think you have to do what we've done in the past and think about maybe the years of experience. And if you up that, I think that recognizes people who have committed to this district. I would not say it's really a cost-saving measure because we're usually hiring people in with 8 or 9 or 10 years of experience, which really helps when we're putting people in the classroom, but it doesn't really negate a lot of savings that we would get from those people retiring, which is what it was intended for. So,
Are there any other questions on early retirement? Not hearing any, we will go ahead and move to the 2022, 2023, 2024 calendar. This is where we'll take action on the public hearing. And can we adopt both of these at the same time, or do we need to take them separately?
you can adopt them at the same time if you
Okay.
choose to.
So I would accept a motion to accept the 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024 academic calendars.
I would second the motion.
I actually did not make a motion,
Oh,
I asked, go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead and
I
make a
will
motion.
make the
Yeah.
motion
All right, so,
to accept the calendars.
so there has been a motion made, is there a second? It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the 2022, 2023, 2024 academic calendars as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And now we move to the first reading of 300, 400 series board policy and additional policies. This is an actionable item, requires a motion and a second.
I wish I could say I'm looking forward to this.
I'm asking Sharon to go ahead and read through the policies.
Yes, okay. So every year, just for clarification of why there are so many, it looks like there are so many on here. Every year, we are required to update our board policies every 5 years. And so we have a rotation. This year, up for review is our 300 series and our 400 series. Typically, that's checking to make sure language is current, making sure our practices are still in place with what we did. There's typically not a lot of changes to the policy, but there are times when we're given recommendations by our policy agency. So we use ISFIS to help us create board policy around things that are trending, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So if you look at our board policy on the use of tobacco, now it's including nicotine, so vapes, because 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't see that as being a pressing issue. Now it is. So we are changing the board policy to reflect some of those things that we're seeing as probably trends or current practices. So several of these that are not in the 300 or 400 series are things that are recommended policy updates that we've been given by our policy agency. And these are the people who advocate for us and write policy, because I wish I could say that they enjoyed it, and I'm sure they do, but not my thing. So I will just go through the policy recommendations. There is a board member conflict of interest. Direct compensation has been raised to $6,000 from $2,500. That's annually. So that's in the course of a year. So if you do business with the school and you're a board member, you cannot earn more than $6,000. So if you're a substitute teacher, you can't earn more than $6,000 in direct compensation from the school.
Why was that raised? Is there, do you
I think
know?
because a lot of our small communities have contractors and people that work in the community and then provide services to the board. The 302.5, over the last 3 years, we've really looked at the superintendent evaluation process. And so we updated that to include, we have new administrative standards for superintendent and for administrators. We used to have 6, and I had 7 because I also did the curriculum director work, but we now have 10. And so this, it's a comprehensive look at not only those new administrative standards, updated timelines, which I think we've come to consensus on about how that process looks on a yearly basis of when I'm going to present information to you about what I'm doing, because you evaluate me. And so I present to you a self-evaluation, you get feedback, and then you determine next steps, goals, that kind of thing. And we just took some of the outdated processes that we have not done with this board out of that policy. Or actually, we took it out of the procedure and policy. So that's an update. So that is in that 300 series to reflect what the board currently does through that process. We did have 2 404.3s. We took one of them out. We took the COVID leave policy out. It does not apply any longer. We took the TB test as a requirement for substitute teachers out, and we increased the pay to $130 a day for substitute teachers and $170 per diem if they work more than 5 consecutive days in a position. That's what we call our long-term sub rate. We eliminated, there was wording in 405.3 that said we would have a truancy officer in every building. We just approved a truancy officer for the district. We don't have that much truancy that we would need one for elementary, middle, and high school, so we took that language out. We took out the recognition of service of employees. There was a paragraph specifically on what gift we would give them, and people didn't necessarily want the gift, so we took that out, and we thought we could just negotiate that every year when we decided what we were going to do for our employees that were leaving or who had been in service for so many years. The possession of controlled substance, all of those, 502.7, 502.1, 502.8, 603.10, and 708.3 R1 all include that now nicotine language in addition to the tobacco language. So that updated several policies with just that change. Graduation requirements, 505.5. We did include computer science, and we did clarify vocational and fine arts. It was in one policy, but not in the 505.5, so we updated that. We added a 532 exposure to allergens. We do see a lot of students coming in with allergies that we've not seen before, so how are we communicating that and handling that? We added that. The 601 school calendar revised to include 1,080 hours or 180 days. So if you remember last year, we went to days, when before that we had been at hours, and so we just made sure the language said one or the other, because schools have the option of either or. 704.2, payment for goods and services. We updated the language to reflect the warrant payment and authority for board secretary and how that process works. So if you want more specifics on that, our auditor gave us feedback on that, and actually the next couple he gave us feedback on. And so when we started to use federal ESSER money, we needed to make sure we had some of these policies to allow for those regulations which the federal government requires that maybe the state government didn't. So the 704.2 applies to that. The 700 public purpose to include more details on site meals and beverages. There are times when we'll offer a full day professional development and we'll offer food within reason here so that teachers don't have to drive somewhere to get food, and we make it a working lunch and let them leave earlier, so we wanted to clarify that. The internal controls and whistleblower is new, and that's being added at the suggestion of our policy advocates. And then the 904.5, we've had several requests over the last, I would say, 6 months for people to use our logo, use our name, and several districts have trademarked, is that the right word, their logo, and I think we'll probably go through that process. You know, I might get a request from somebody who wants to make Christmas ornaments and sell them with our logo and things, and typically they just come as a request, but this is one of those times when the lawyer did say it might be good just to have a policy so that it's consistent with everybody who makes that request, and then we just have a kind of a process for how we go through and evaluate what those requests are and how we're going to grant their use or not use of those. So those are the recommended changes to the policy. Again, it's beyond the 3 and the 400s, but it's all recommended as a result of either changes to kind of where we are in society or recommendations based on some of the language.
So the 904.5, the name and logo usage, does that actually specify how that approval process happens, or does it just say it needs to be approved?
The policy would be that there's a process, and then we would create a procedure that would specify how.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
To the policy 405.1, the substitute pay, is that pretty competitive with other schools around us?
Yes, I would say we looked at it and raised it 2 years ago. It was at 105. There are districts around us that pay 150, but I would say this is on the high end. I think there's only one district that's at 150, but that could have changed as a result of the sub shortage. So I get information from all of the conference schools, and Jen Boffman is connected with our local schools, so Clark, Martinsdale, Southeast Warren. So when we have a question like this, we'll send out and say, okay, what does everybody pay for sub? And then we get the feedback, and then we make recommendations to the board based on that. So I would say this is competitive, or at least it was 2 years ago. That might be on the average to low side now, but I've not heard of a lot of districts increasing their sub pay.
Any other questions or conversation regarding the first reading of 300, 400 series board policy and additional policies?
I would say, just clarifying for the 2 new board members, is that we'll read these 3 times. So you can go and look at, I think I've provided in that folder called Board Policy Updates with the strikeouts, so you can actually read how it would read now and what was taken out. So, and you can do that before the next meeting and before the next meeting. So if you have any recommendations to changing that, you can either let me know before the next meeting or just bring it to the next meeting.
So this says action, but,
You approve the first reading.
Okay.
But there are 3 readings that need to go through for board policy.
got it.
Yep.
Thank you, sorry.
And the red line is wonderful for that, those strike through, otherwise reading the whole thing and trying to figure out what change would be miserable, so. Looking for a motion?
I would entertain a motion at this point.
I'd move to approve the first reading of 300, 400 series of board policy and the additional policies as presented.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Having been properly moved and seconded to approve the first reading of the 300, 400 series board policy and additional policies, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. All right, the OSHA mandate and policy for discussion.
So this conversation looked a lot different last Tuesday when I wrote this. So that's encouraging that they're putting a hold on that, just because of all the unknowns and the uncertainty. I think Roger and I lamented about that a little bit when we met last week. So that's good that they're taking a step back from that. As I told you, we had been given guidance when it first came out to plan to implement and then put it on pause. So they had recommended that we pass the policy that laid out what our direction was going to be, whether we chose option A, which was everybody vaccinated, or option B, which is if you're not vaccinated, then having the exempt. I know that we had one community member share that. I do think it's important to note that the process for exemption is completely on the individual. So if this does go into place, and I'm just kind of answering the question because I think there was concern about that, there are two exemptions that are available for this, but they're not exemptions from everything. And so I think that as we get more information on that, we'll be able to make a better decision, because the way that it was explained to me is you can exempt from having the vaccine, which is everyone's right, but you can't exempt from being tested. You can exempt from a mask, but so it was some things you could exempt from and some things you couldn't. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they put a pause on it, because there were so many unknowns about how that was going to be implemented and what the expectations were. And so I anticipate if they come back with this, it'll have more detail that we have to consider. But this is one of those where I'm not even going to think about it until I get something different, because I'm not even supposed to think how it's going to play out. So the first guidance was to create the policy, have the policy approved, and then just put it on hold. And then the last guidance was just don't even do anything. Just nothing, because we don't know what the courts are going to decide, and rightfully so. So what was going to be a discussion about how or what we wanted to do with that policy recommendation is now kind of a sigh, and let's wait this one out and see what they tell us over the course of the next couple of months. So.
And didn't Iowa exempt? There were some rules that the governor passed.
Yeah, the state of Iowa did. Yep.
Yeah,
And so those are the
so-
ones that would apply. But I do think, I mean, we've always had the exemptions for medical or religious considerations for any kind of vaccines. I mean, that's not new practice for here anyway. So, I mean, we would do the same thing, I would think, if this did come to pass, and what does that look like, so.
Any other questions or comments?
Sort of a comment. Would it make sense to delay communication to the teachers prior to actually having a policy in place? I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, it
'cause
does.
I think, yeah.
And I think that what I've always told the teachers is, and in the emails that I communicate with them, is this is what we're being told currently. And I said, right now it's on stay, so we're not putting it in place. But I do think it's important that they hear what I mean, if I hadn't sent out communication to them about the conversation, then I think I would have been remiss in saying, you know, just assume that we're going to take care of it and then we'll tell you what the board decides. I think that my approach has always been, here's what we know right now, and then this is what we're doing next, so we're taking this to the board, and then once that decision is made, I'll communicate out again. So the first email I sent out was, we're going to put this in place as recommended, but we don't know what that's going to look like, so that could change over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but I want you to be aware. Then I sent out the communication last week, which said, this is now on stay, so we're not even taking it to the board. So I guess I'm of the mindset that, for me, communication is to communicate more often with the information that we do have, so that they're aware and they can ask questions and they can get information that they need to. They can bring questions to the board if they have questions before that policy is even talked about. They can talk to you individually if they have questions about it, instead of the board making a decision and then them having to decide what to do next. So I've always erred on giving them information before and then letting them be a part of the conversation, as opposed to the board and then, you know, what next. And I correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're thinking if we didn't communicate, then we would just be without the controversy of the questions and the concerns of the staff. And I've talked to a lot of people about it, but I also will tell them this is what we know right now. And this is what, and the board has to decide, because it really ultimately is up to you as a board. So I don't think that it would be beneficial to change that practice once it becomes policy, because I think the staff need to be part of the conversation.
Okay, any other questions, comments, conversation? Not hearing any? We'll move on to the graphics quote.
So this is the quote that came from the Facilities Committee. They had recommended we do some work on signage and work on, making our school very noticeable, that we are road runners and that we are, I think I'm going too far ahead. And what that can look like. So we were tasked with not only outdoor signage, but also signage indoors. And so they sent us some mock-ups of what this can look like. This does not include all of them. I just gave you some samples so you could kind of see. I'll just pull up. This would be coming into the elementary as an example, and we have not solidified any of these. I just wanted you to see we can make changes to any of them. We can tell them we don't want some, and we have told them that, and we do like some. But this is when you walk in, the two sets of doors, or the 4 sets of doors there. It can either look like the top or it can look like the bottom. Just some minor changes to how they look and how they're presented. One has stripes, one has dots. But I shared the file with you so you could see the various places in the building. We're looking at both offices. We're looking at the main entrance to the building. We're looking at the fitness center and our locker room area there where public is for different events. We're looking at the entrances to the gym, the commons areas in both. I think I might have mentioned that. And then in the elementary, the entrance area for the elementary. So I would ask that you approve the quote. It was, and that might change depending on if we change the mock-up, but not by a lot. I would think if anything, it's going to decrease. But I listed all the areas there that this would include, and it's $39,218. And then this is phase 1. We would also do some work down the hallways, both in the middle school and in the high school in phase 2.
So this is based on the recommendation from the Facilities Committee, correct? And the Facilities Committee is something the board
Right.
has sanctioned.
Correct.
And so this is their recommendation.
So they're
coming
not
to us.
recommending these specific,
But they're recommending.
but they're recommending that we do the signage in the building.
Right, right.
Yes.
That makes sense.
How long do these last? I mean, they're pretty durable?
Yes.
Okay.
I think they apply them to the bricks. I don't know the whole process. Steve, do you have more?
No, I don't understand the notebook process is start to finish, but it's a 3M product is what they continue to tell us that is a high-end vinyl graphic that would be long-term. I don't know that they give you an end life of what it is. Obviously, if it's on an exterior window, there's some fading things that go with it over time, but it's a varsity group is a group that there are hundreds of schools around the state of Iowa that they have done graphics for before, so I think the quality of their work speaks to their name, but I can't give you specifics on
No. No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a one-year deal and to turn around and do it again.
No, it's
Okay.
several.
Yeah, okay.
Is there an overall, because I know you said this was $39,000 for the phase 1. Do we have an idea of what phase 2 would consist of and phase 3 and budget?
We talked about in the high school, so the long part of what we call the I, so down by the superintendent's office, possibly something at the guidance office. So when you come in the superintendent's doors there's those glass pillars or those glass cases, so something on that. And then something down further where the library is to make the space welcoming. And then in the middle school, we talked about doing something in their hallway. So phase 2 is a lot less because we looked at all of the common spaces that public come to first. And that's why this one is so much more expensive than those other 2 options. Jeff or Steve, other areas, we talked about doing something in the daycare the daycare hallway that's a little bit more younger in appearance for the audience that's there. But we have not talked about phase 2 because we thought, let's just try and get through phase 1. But cost-wise, I would say half, if that, for the rest of the projects. This does not include an image, but if you think of the fitness center, the windows in the front of the fitness center, it's covering all of those. And then, like I said, almost every place where you walk in, identifying the school. So it's pretty comprehensive for phase 1.
And just to specify, when you say covering those, it makes it tough to see in, but you can still see out. It's
Correct.
the-
Correct. You still have light
it's
coming in.
perforated.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or conversation? This does require a motion and a second to approve.
I'd move to approve the graphics quote as presented.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the graphics quote as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? SBRC application for increasing enrollment, open enrollment out, and LEP instruction beyond 5 years.
So every year, we find out at Certified Count Day, different numbers than maybe what we had projected for. And the areas, the SBRC group allows for people to ask for additional spending authority. We are not asking the board to consider increasing any taxes currently. We're not asking for any allocations right now. We're just asking to apply to SBRC to increase spending authority if we need to when we do our budget in March. And we
So-
have to have this done by December 1st.
So us taking action to approve this tonight does not mean we're going to do it, but if we don't take action,
Then we cannot do it.
cannot do it.
Correct.
and this is a routine vote.
Yeah, anytime you can get spending authority, you want to do it.
Can you explain why? Right, so spending authority allows how much the district, it,
Right, if you have zero spending authority or your unspent balance goes to zero, then you're in trouble with the state of Iowa.
even if you have cash. So
Right.
you can be solvent, but you can't spend, you
Correct.
can't.
Right, so each year, we're given a certain allocation of what we can spend in our budget, and we can't spend more than that. We can spend less, and then that becomes what we call our unspent balance, but we can't spend more. And so some of these programs, so let's say we had an influx of English language learners, people who came here who couldn't speak English, and maybe we had 20 families move in over the summer. Those services would require another teacher, they would require additional services or supports, maybe resources, all of those components that go into that program. Well, we wouldn't have allowed for that when we created our budget previously, but we now see an increase based on our enrollment, and so we're just asking to make that shift so that we can cover that cost. It doesn't mean that we're going to do it, it just means that we're asking for permission to raise that spending authority so we can cover the costs of some of those programs. And in this case, it's increasing enrollment, which is the one that we're asking for, because we did have an increase to enrollment, which is good, but we didn't plan on that increase to enrollment, so we're asking for the authority to spend more money to meet the needs of having an increased enrollment. So if we have to add another associate, or, all of those things that might go into that. So this is for the School Budget Review Committee. It's really a formality, because in March, you'll decide if you're going to do it or not. But if we don't do it now, we can't ask for the increase in March. So this is step one of that process. And we're only asking for the increased enrollment. Is that correct?
Because that's all we can.
That's all, I mean, we're very limited, and it'll tell us, it'll spit out what we can do and what we can't do based on our numbers. So the only one that we apply for is the increased in enrollment this year.
So don't gloss over the fact of increased enrollment is a wonderful thing for our district. And it was significant
It
this
is
year.
wonderful, yeah.
It is good, yes,
So-
it's very good.
Please don't gloss over that, because that's a good thing.
Yes, it's a very good thing.
Makes Ted's life easier.
And yours too.
Yes, yes.
All right, any other questions? I'd entertain a motion at this point.
I'd move to approve the SBRC application for increasing enrollment, open enrollment out, and LEP instruction beyond 5 years.
I would second the SBRC application for increasing enrollment, open enrollment out, and LEP instruction beyond 5 years.
It has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Air conditioning engineering services, this is an actionable item. It will require a motion and a second before we vote.
And this comes from using our ESSER funds for the air conditioning project. All of those need to be signed off by an engineer. And so this is the group that we are going to work with to do that project. I think Ted included the contract language. It really is dependent on what we do, how much we pay them. But we're not going to exceed the percentage that we pay them. So if our project is between $300,000 and $400,000, it's this percentage that they're paid. And if it's $400 to $500, it's this percentage. So it obviously, the more you spend, the less percentage you pay. But that's, I mean, I think it's a pretty standard contract. Ted, do you have anything else to add to that?
Not really, no. Honestly, I don't.
They came in and we met with them and we talked about different options. I would say this is one of those times when you'd ask the questions about alternative options for heating and cooling. You know, if you have things that you would like us to dig into and ask them to consider for us, now would be the time for us to maybe take advantage of that if that's something the board is interested in, whether it's solar or geothermal or whatever. We can do that. As we work through this process with them, which might be a good way to at least get the conversation started as to what those costs would be. Even if we couldn't afford to do them with just the ESSER money, we might be able to take that to the facilities committee and plan for it over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I think asking them specifically for recommendations for something alternate, I mean, we can throw out 3 things up here that may be very viable or very not viable. So asking them for some alternates, I think, would be very wise, and it really, on the fee structure of what they're doing, really wouldn't cost us anymore, or shouldn't cost
Right.
us anymore.
All right, any other conversation or questions regarding the air conditioning engineering services?
Would we send our questions to you, or would we have the engineer come in? I know at one time that was mentioned.
Right, and I think they would be receptive to either one. I think if it's a matter of wanting to know potential costs, that we should probably send them to them before, so that we would have that meeting, and then they can come explain them at the board meeting. So I would say send those questions to Ted or myself, or to both of us, and we'll make sure when we meet with them, we can bring those specific things up. We'll ask for recommendations that they have for alternative energy that maybe schools are using or businesses are using that they're finding to be effective, or options that we either have considered or haven't considered. So we'll bring that. But I think we would like to give them the option to come up with some ideas before we had them come in. So I would say just send them to us, and then we can have them come to the meeting and work through what those are.
And then isn't there kind of an arbitrage to go from the general fund to the management fund for some of those things? Like natural gas is paid for out of the general fund, and if we change to solar, it's paid for out of the management fund? Is that right? Or is that, and I shouldn't use that word.
Well, it depends on who you ask and what you ask.
Okay.
Solar though, is it?
It depends on who you ask and what you ask.
Oh, I mean, I'm just,
No,
that's,
so
I mean,
the
that might,
natural gas, if
Yeah.
we're in a pool, we can pay for that out of the management fund, but not according to everybody. But we have an indication from the
The state auditor says you
state
can.
auditor says you can, but
The DE
some of the DE personnel say no. So that becomes then a question of, okay, do you go with the state audit or do you go with the DE? You can have the conversation, does the DE have the right to tell you how to use your funds, allocate your funds? Well, according to Iowa code, they can put parameters on what you use those funds for. But if the state auditor, who is approving how your books are reconciled, approves that use,
All right.
then that's why I'm saying it depends on who you ask
Right.
and what you ask.
Is that
Maybe-
the type of question that Matt Gillespie would be interested in?
I don't think so, because he doesn't really do that, I don't think.
I shouldn't have went there, but all I was trying to do is suggest that the engineer is going to know the most efficient way, but he might
Yes.
not know the most school-efficient way. And so if there's,
Correct.
a school, somebody
Right.
from, I don't know, I think the DE Department of Ed has some people that know
Yes, yes,
those
yes.
things. And we marry the two and it's perfect. so.
Correct.
All right, I am still waiting for a motion. If there's no other questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
I motion to utilize the engineering services of ISG for the air conditioning and other alternative energy designs.
I'll second that motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we utilize the services of ISG for air conditioning and engineering services. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Next meeting dates.
So you approved, I hate to do this,
Oh,
but you
gosh.
approved the fourth Monday of each month.
Yes.
So in December, that lands on December 27th. So I'm going to recommend that you maybe consider moving it to either the 20th, which is still a break from school day, or the 13th, which is when school is still in session, is a quick turnaround for your conversations like early retirement. So
Are there any basketball or wrestling conflicts?
typically not on Monday, but I will double check right now.
With what? What's the date?
Either the 13th, if you want to go while school is still in session, or the 20th, which is the first day of the break.
There's a junior high basketball on the 13th, starting at 4 p.m.
So they're usually done by 5:30 or 6.
by 6, yeah.
6, so that
And
wouldn't
it's
necessarily.
home.
Yes, so that would not necessarily interfere with,
I don't have wrestling on my calendar.
I'm looking now, so 1 second. We don't have a concert that night, so. So the 13th, we have middle school boys basketball on the calendar and an after-prom committee meeting. And then on the 20th, which is the first day of the break, we have nothing.
I guess I'd rather do the 13th, just so the administration doesn't need to come into the office. But as long as it gives time for everybody to process the information needed for early retirement and some of the other things. I don't know,
We could do it without the administrative reports if you wanted
Right,
to do
yeah,
that
or,
as
you
well.
know,
I mean,
something
we
like
could-
that. I don't
We could
want,
work that out, I think.
yeah.
Although
whatever
Mr.
you-
Tessa would have to be here to run the equipment.
Or we could ask them to do a 5-page summary of,
Yeah, we could ask that.
do it just in
Mr.
writing.
Tessa will show up, he said.
I have no preference between the 13th
I have no
and the
preference
20th.
either.
No preference.
We're going to leave it up to you then.
The only thing I would ask that you consider, maybe this will change your mind, I don't know, is that if we decide, because early retirement will be on action, whether you take action or table it next time is entirely up to your conversation, but then we can get the information out to teachers while they're here and answer questions, whereas if we do it over
Yeah.
break, then we're mailing it to them. So that might be why I would recommend the 13th, but I understand it's a quick turnaround, so.
Noted.
Good to me. 13th is fine.
13th will work for me. Just gotta change the date on that calendar. Just don't know how to do it.
Six PM here.
Okay, so the next board meeting will be Monday, December 13th at 6 PM here in the auditorium. There is a reminder here to mark your calendars, the holiday open house from 2 to 4:30, December 16th. Where is that taking place this year?
It will be in the elementary library. And we encourage board members to come for as much or as little as you want to, but it's always a great celebration of the holidays. And I like to think of it as a thank you for all they've done so far and just wishing them joy through the season. So
It is a good opportunity to connect with the staff as they come in. So, okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn at this point.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye, opposed? We are adjourned.